our disposal so that we can be able to come up with a comprehensive and sound literature review, not only developed from using AI tools, but that is predicated and grounded in literature, and literature that is credible. So before we go further, I just want to give us some few minutes just to allow everybody to settle in. I see some people are still joining in. So I'm just going to give us some more 2 minutes more so that we can all settle and get ready for the presentation. My name is Dr. Moringa. I'm a research director at MNG Research. We're based in Durban, South Africa. That's where we are based. And our physical address is 17 Lennox Road, Windermere, Durban, close to Florida Road. So if you want to join us or if you want to do a consultation, our working hours are between 9 and 4:30 on a daily, excluding weekends. Weekends are only strictly by consultation and bookings. So just a few minutes before we start. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Again, my name is Dr. Moringa. This presentation is brought to you by MNG Research. I'm the research director at MNG Research based in Durban. Right, so first things first, literature review, that's what we are focusing on today. However, we are divorcing ourselves from doing a literature review using the traditional means. I'm sure most of us who have done a literature review before, they are familiar with the traditional ways of doing a literature review. In this particular presentation, we're going to integrate the traditional aspect of literature review with the AI tools. And when you are done or after this presentation, you should be able to do your presentation or your developing your literature review in the least time that you have. So we say this should be done. The presentation that I'm going to do, it will last about 15 to 20 minutes. But when you have mastered the art of doing this presentation or of doing the literature review, you can actually be able to develop your literature review in 10 minutes. That is for masters or for PhD, depending with the number of pages that you have, or for your honors. But for honors, I'm sure if you're doing your honors, the literature review should not take you more than 10 minutes to do the literature review for your presentation. So let's get into it. Right, first things first, we need to understand whether doing a literature review using AI tools is ethical. Right, so I would say to you, the ethics of doing literature review or of writing research reports with using AI tools, there is a lot of debates, there is a lot of discussion surrounding that, whether this is ethical or not. In universities in Europe, in America, they've already come up with guidelines as to what is expected and what is not expected when you are using AI tools, particularly generative tools, chatbots. However, within the African context, particularly in South Africa, universities are lagging behind as to how they are reacting and responding to the advent of AI tools, right? So first things first that you need to be in mind before you embark on the process of writing your literature review using AI tools, you need to have and you should clearly disclose the use of any generative AI tools that you've used in your work. So this will ensure transparency about the methods that were used, and this will also help readers understand the contribution of AI tools in the research process. So as of now, AI tools do not qualify as authors, right? But they qualify as tools that assist in the writing process, right? So you need to disclose most in your methodology how you have integrated these tools in developing your literature review. So researchers should validate the output generated by AI tools to ensure its accuracy. So you need to, after you've generated whatsoever you've generated with AI tools, you need to validate that, and you should be able to verify and not use them blindly, so as to ensure that information that you've generated therein is accurate. You also need to attribute. I've mentioned already that you need to attribute where everywhere that you have used AI tools, where everywhere you have generated information using AI tools, you need to provide attribution, and if specific passages or ideas were generated by ChatGPT, so a researcher should attribute them to AI models to maintain academic integrity and avoid plagiarism. You need to also embark on an ethical review. As a researcher involving AI, including the use of ChatGPT and DeepSeek now and others, right? You should undergo the ethical review to assess the potential risk and ensure compliance with ethical standards, such as those related to informed consent, privacy, and fairness. You also need to ensure the issue of contextualization. You need to ensure the issue of contextualization. What we mean by contextualization is your researchers should provide context for the AI generated context within the broader research framework. More often than not, you'll find that when you generate information on ChatGPT or DeepSeek or any other tools that you have or that you might have used, research has proven that there is a divorce, or the context normally is not up to standard with the context, especially the African context. The tools that we use, they were Western developed. They were developed using Western standards and Western context, right? Such that if you are seeking to develop some or generate some information within the African context or South African context, you might miss the point, or they might miss the point, because their development and the developers did not put into consideration all the global context, all the African context, all the local context. As a result, that might affect how your context will come out within your work. So it's very important to understand the context and to make sure that when you are generating that information, it captures your context from within which you are coming from. So you also need to mitigate bias. So as a researcher, you should be aware of potential biases in the output generated by ChatGPT. I'll tell you that the issues, or when you're doing research that relates to issues of gender, that relates to issues of feminism, issues of sex and sexuality, you always need to be aware, and you always need to be upfront in terms of biases that comes out from there, because the developers, they have developed these tools, these platforms with some kind of biases that they already have. Issues of LGBTQ, there are biases that are embedded within those technologies and those platforms. And when you are using these platforms, it's very imperative for you as a researcher to be aware of these biases and flag them. So as a result, they will not affect your line of thinking or your line of argument when you are conducting your research. So what we have said so far is that we're setting the tone or the background for using the case for using AI tools, but we are saying when we are developing our literature review, we shouldn't just jump in to generate information. We need to be aware of these ethical issues in the process of generating or developing our work. Right, so before you get to use the AI tools, we always advise people to say, we always advise people to say, you need to understand the research process first before you get into just generating information for your literature review. More often than not, as a supervisor and as a research consultant, the shortfalls and the pitfalls that I've experienced with student work is that you'd find that a person was just given they have a topic that they've also developed using AI tools. They have this topic that they have, and they just type in the topic and say, write a literature review for me, a 1,000 or 2,000 words literature review for me for this topic. And the downside about that command or that approach to writing your literature review is that you do not understand the process of research. Because if you understand the basics and fundamentals of research, of the research process itself, you have a better understanding of commanding the platform so that they can generate that information that you require and that will assist you to address your research question. So we are saying, let's understand the research process first. So the research process begins with the research topic, right? But before you get to the research topic, you need the broader understanding of what literature is out there that has been done, right? So every research project has its unique objectives, its methodologies, and target audience. So understanding the research process now helps the researcher to determine the specific requirements for their study and how AI tools can then best assist your goal. So without this understanding of your objectives, of your methodologies, of who the audience of your research are, you will not be able to effectively use the AI tools, and they will not be able to assist you best. That's why you see, as a result, when you have submitted your literature review, your supervisor will tell you that this is not addressing the research topic. This is not up to standard. This is misaligned. This is misguided. This is not right. Why? Because the student or the researcher does not understand the research process. So it is imperative and important to actually understand the research process. And because we're saying without the understanding of the research process, there is a risk of using AI tools inappropriately or generating output that does not align with the research objectives. So there is also need for critical evaluation. Research involves critical thinking, analysis, and interpretation of data and literature. So researchers, they need to evaluate the quality, the relevance, and reliability of the information that is generated by AI tools within the context of research. So if you do not understand the aspects of the literature review, critical thinking, analysis, and interpretation of data and literature, without that solid understanding of the research process, a researcher may not be equipped to critically assess the output that is generated by AI tools, right? And as a result, this leads to inaccuracies or bias in your research report. So it's very important to actually have an understanding of the critical evaluation of the research process. Is very important. Then the integration of the human expertise. AI tools like ChatGPT are powerful aids. They should be treated like research assistants. The human aspect is very key and is very important because the AI develops or generates information that it has been commanded to generate by the researcher themselves. So if the researcher themselves, they are not privy or they are not abreast with relevant information, or they are not privy or understand the research process, what we see is that garbage in, garbage out. What you put in AI, the commands that you put in, they generate information from what you have put in. So if you put half-baked information or commands in your AI platforms, you will risk getting the same information from the platforms that you're using, right? So understanding the process allows the researcher effectively integrate AI-generated content with their own insights, analysis, and expertise. So, in a nutshell, this integration ensures that the AI tools will enhance rather than overshadow the human contribution to the researcher. So, most people always ask questions: do we think we still need the researcher? Of course, yes, and emphatically yes, we do need the researcher. We do need the researcher because the AI plays the role of a research assistant. Now, let's move on to the ethical consideration. Research involves ethical consideration related to participants' rights, data privacy, integrity, and social impact. So understanding the research process helps the researcher to anticipate and address ethical issues that may arise when using AI tools. It thus enables you as a researcher to make informed research decision about ethical use of AI in your research. This includes issues such as transparency, bias mitigation, and data privacy. Right. So the last thing that you need to do is to researcher reports are a means of communicating your findings, insights, and conclusions to the academic community and broader academic audience. So if you don't understand the research process, you will risk generating information that does not meet the academic standards. And when you are developing your report, you will have problems in developing or in communicating your report, your research report. So basically what we're saying in a nutshell is that we will use, and in our demonstration, we'll demonstrate how to develop a literature review using the AI. We'll use different tools that we have, the basic entry, right, that most of us have used, but I will tell you that we have been using them, but the information that you're going to get from here will be a game changer for you, right? So as we move on, our focus in this particular presentation is developing a literature review, right? So what is the importance of a literature review? Because it is very important for us to understand why we should do a literature review before we even get into developing the literature review. And this is one challenge that we're facing with current researchers, because what happens is that they know how to generate information, but for what end it is not really clear. So let's get into it and find out why we should have why should we care about writing a literature review. So a literature review provides the context for the research. Basically, it summarizes and synthesizes the existing knowledge, the theories, the findings from previous studies. It also identifies the gaps by reviewing the literature. It also reviews often forms of the theoretical framework or the conceptual foundations for the research. It also provides a guidance for the methodology. Literature reviews also informs researchers about the methodologies, the research design, the data collection techniques that have been used in previous literature. Hence, I always say that you don't need to develop a new methodology or scratch your head about the methodology that you would use in your study. Do a literature review, find out what previous studies have done, and adopt the same methodologies and theories that are in previous research. So a literature review is not just a summary of studies, it's a critical analysis and synthesis of what has been done in previous studies. So literature review involves critically evaluating the quality, the relevance, and the reliability of the sources consulted. This involves assessing the strengths and limitations of previous studies. The most important aspect of the literature review now, it is the synthesis and analysis, where you go beyond summarizing individual studies and involve synthesizing and analyzing the findings, the patterns, the trends across multiple sources. This synthesis will then help researchers to draw conclusions, then identify patterns and develop new insights. And that's why we should conduct a literature review for a study. I tell you that if you are to produce a good dissertation, a good master thesis, you need to have a sound and a proper literature review, because your literature review, it informs, right, the key questions, it informs the theory, it informs the methodology, it informs the discussion, the presentation of findings. So the literature review is a golden thread, and it ties the thesis or the dissertation together, right? So this is it about the background of writing a literature review. All right, you need to understand all these aspects that I've mentioned, right? So the next section that we want to talk about is that for us to be able to get into the AI platforms, right, and for us to utilize them effectively and get the rich information that we require, the first step of our study or of our process is to generate research questions, right? And I'm assuming that everybody has key research questions for their study, right? So the tools that we're going to use Google Scholar, right? A traditional one. Most of us have used Google Scholar. We're going to use Consensus, right? Some of us are familiar with Consensus. Some of us might not be familiar with Consensus. Then after Consensus, we move on to ChatGPT, right? We're not going to use DeepSeek for now and Perplexity, because we are, for the purpose of this demonstration and for the purpose of time, right? And after that, we're going to go to how, after we've generated the information, overcoming issues of plagiarism and AI detection for Turnitin, right? That's very important, and we need to use those and make sure that we utilize those. Right, so before we go any further, do we have any questions before we get into the AI tools? So now we're transmuting, or we are moving from the traditional aspect of literature review. Now we're getting into the practical demonstration of developing the literature review for your study using the AI platforms that I've mentioned. Do we have any questions before we move on to that? Just quickly, before we get into the next step. Any questions or comments? All right, it seems there is none. Okay, let's proceed. So the best way to develop your literature review is to begin or to use key questions, the key or your research questions, right? Your research questions are very important. You cannot develop a literature review without research questions, right? So my advice is that I've assembled questions that I have on my screen, right? The first one is, what challenges did COVID-19 lockdown have on the Sunday Times operations in South Africa? How did the Sunday Times adapt to the financial constraints of COVID-19 in South Africa? And what interventions did the government and other organizations make available to mitigate and overcome the financial constraints of the COVID-19 pandemic of the news industry in South Africa? And what strategies did the Sunday Times newspaper adopt during the COVID-19 pandemic period in South Africa? And how did the COVID challenges impact news reporting? The reason why I have these questions is for the purposes of us to get to generate the information that we need. Right, so I'm going to move to a different screen, right, so that we can see how we can begin to develop our literature review. All right, so I have here on my screen, this is my ChatGPT, right? I'm using ChatGPT for the subscribed one. So besides the questions that I've given you, I've generated some other questions that I have, right? And my topic here is navigating the mental health crisis among youth, an examination of psychological, educational, and structural challenges in contemporary society. Then I have the 4 research questions that I have, right? So I want to generate a literature review, all right? The short or the downfall of most researchers is that they want to generate a literature review using ChatGPT on this particular page. If you want to do that, it might work, but the literature that is generated here is substandard. Why? Because number one, ChatGPT generates false and fake citations, and number two, the information is not based on credible sources, right? And it's not based on literature that has been published. So ChatGPT will crawl on the web, on the net, on any information that it finds, right? So that literature review is not up to the standard. So what do we do, right? So I said, let's begin with the questions in mind. Questions first. So I'll copy and paste these questions here. So let's use question number 1 for the purposes of demonstration. I'll take my first question. My first question is, what are the predominant psychological factors contributing to mental health challenges among youth in South Africa? So our first point of call is Google Scholar, right? And I'm sure most of us are familiar with Google Scholar. Then we copy and paste our question on Google Scholar, right? Then we click search, right? On your left, on your far left, I'm sure you can see my cursor. Google Scholar can give you a option to say what kind of literature do you need. If you see the first article that comes out, it's a book, it's 1995. The other one is 1998, the other one is 2007. So this literature in itself that is showing on my screen might be deemed irrelevant based on the custom range or based on the year in which it was published. Right, for us to be safe, our literature needs to be within the 5-year range. We are in 2025, so our literature, we need to customize it to 2021 or 2022. Right, so we click since 2021. Right, you see here the changes that are there. Now we have literature that was published in 2021, literature published in 2023, literature published in 2024, 2025, right? So you can actually customize again and say, I only need literature that was published in 2025. So you click since 2025, then you only have the literature that is most relevant, 2021, but our custom range should be 2025 or 2021. So the approach of using ChatGPT might be tedious and long. The process of using Google Scholar to develop your literature might be long and tedious, right? So, but however, we need to demonstrate it. So the best way that you need to do is to go on site, right? Then you need to copy and paste your citation, right? And you need to go back to your ChatGPT and copy it and paste it, the citation that you have, right? Remember, we're developing literature, your literature according to your research question, right? So you need a command. So your first command would be, for example, right, generate for me a literature review in relation or response to research question 1, right? So like I said initially, that your command is very important. It's more important than anything else that you can get from ChatGPT. So generate a literature review in relation to response or response to question number 1, right? Then let's put in some more information or some more commands so that we narrow down what we actually expecting, right? So the literature review should be 2,000 words long, right? It should use sources that are provided below only, right? Use Harvard. Sorry, Kumbo, can you please mute? Okay, thank you. Use Harvard style of referencing, right? Then we put an example. We're saying Harvard is author, year, right? And then page number, right? That's the second command. Then ChatGPT has a tendency of using long sentences, so we don't want those long sentences and verbosity, right? Then we say avoid verbosity, and long sentences, right? Right, use full stops and avoid using commas, right? The purpose of this command, avoid use full stops and avoiding using commas, you'd find that when you're generating your literature review using ChatGPT, it can have a sentence, a single sentence that has 5 or 6 commas in it, and therefore prolonging the sentence to 5 lines, of which a sentence should be maximum 2 lines. Right, so this command that I've inserted is for the purposes of regulating that. Right, so below here we have one source. Let's go back to our Google Scholar and retrieve more sources. Right, so we want to input 5 to 10 sources. Right, then we put them down. Right, so I say this is a more manual way of doing it. Right, this is a manual way of doing it. I'll show you a automatic way of doing it. I'm doing this for the purposes of presentation. Right, when we move to the next. Right, so we have 3 sources now. We want to put 10 sources at least so that we can have a good literature review of 2,000 words. Right, at least 10 sources. Right, so we're using Harvard. Right, then let's input, let's go back to our chat, let's go back to our Google Scholar. Right here we have, okay, we need to go back to our Google Scholar. Go back to our Google Scholar and get more sources. Google Scholar, let's get more sources so that we can have a rich literature review. Remember, we're saying the more sources you have, the richer the discussion is, right? So this is just a basic and a manual aspect of doing this, right? So we have 7 now, we need to get to 10. Right, there are 2 words that I want to share with you that you should always use in your commands, right? That ChatGPT has a response to when you're writing a literature review. So if you use the word comprehensive in your literature review, that literature review will be different from any other literature review if you just use the word comprehensive. So generate a literature review. Here I'm going to put a word comprehensive. This word is a game changer when you're using AI tools to generate literature review. Generate a comprehensive and solid literature review, right? These two words, comprehensive and solid, they are a game changer when you are using your literature, when you're generating a literature review. Right, so this is what we have so far. Let's command literature review, ChatGPT, and see what it can generate for us. Right, so our literature review is in relation to the research question number 1. Let's see what the literature review is going to come out. Right, so this is just the basic, right? This is what everybody is going to get, but this doesn't look like a literature review that you submit, right? So I want to introduce something that most people, that will game change, that will change the outlook of this literature review, right? So the best way to change this literature review is to introduce what we call the examples, or what we call a guideline for writing a literature review. So by so doing, what I'm going to do, I'm going to import or to use the template for writing a literature review. So I have a template that I have, they are available online. So this is my template here. I'm going to put it in and say, now the ChatGPT has simply generated for me the different themes that are in relation to the topic, that the research question number 1, and this doesn't read like a literature review that you submit. So I'm going to say regenerate a literature review and follow the guidelines in the attached template. Right, the literature review should follow the step-by-step examples provided in the template. Right, so I want to move away from what everybody does for writing a literature review using ChatGPT. Now I have a template that is expected. The university, the university or the department or the school has given me a template of writing a literature review. So now I'm going to use that template. Each paragraph must follow the academic standard. So what changes is the type of commands that you give ChatGPT. The academic standards for writing paragraphs in a literature review. Right, so now we are more focused and more narrow. We have a basic here, the structure that is not detailed, but now we want to move away from this structure. We want to give it something that is more narrow and focused to our study. Then let's go for it and see what would come out. Right, there we go. Right, so because right now this is what we've been talking about. Now we've moved away from this section here on my far right to just some few lines and points to an actually full-fledged literature review. The template that I've attached, I'll read for you point 2.2. It says the existing body of research on youth mental health suggests that it is a complex interplay of individual development and environmental experiences. Then it brings in Patel et al. Defines mental health as not only the absence of illness, but the presence of well-being and adaptive functioning. This view is echoed in alkaline and anger bioecological model, which contains that. So now this is what I mean by a literature review. We are having a general aspect, a general topic, a general introduction to say this is what research says, and this is what Patel says, right? And Patel is supported by these studies here, right? Then here, the last sentence, it says the integration of such models is justified. They acknowledge that youth do not develop in isolation but are shaped by multi-layered determinants. Understanding mental health therefore requires that we view psychological well-being not as a static attribute but as a function of evolving experience and relationships. Then we have our citations. Right, now let me justify this paragraph, this section here. This section is developed not from ChatGPT. ChatGPT didn't develop this paragraph or this section. However, it has followed what I have developed, firstly in my commands, secondly in my I've given it literature to make reference to, and thirdly, I've given it a template to follow for writing a literature review, right? So what we have developed here, number one, it's not plagiarized, and number two, if I copy and paste this section and put it on a humanizer to detect AI, this section here, its chances of being indicated for plagiarism or from AI detection are minimal. Why? Because in as much as it's been developed by ChatGPT, the commands that I've used, it's just like I've taken my mind and my fingers to type and borrow them to ChatGPT, and therefore it has done that work for me. Otherwise, this work, it is following my train of thought, and it's following my template and my guidelines, and therefore it stood apart, and it is different from a literature review that is just developed or generated when somebody say generate for me a literature review for this topic. So the same follows for all the subheadings that we have. 2.3, right? 2.3 and 2.4. What I love about my literature review is that the first sentence itself, it is a topic sentence. It says a considerable amount of literature has been published in the correlation between sleep disruption and adolescent mental health. Then after that, we introduce that literature and we synthesize that literature with other literatures. So then when we are done, we are giving justification of why this point that we are making is relevant to the study that we are investigating. So this is how we do it. So we have done the first step is taking sources from Google Scholar, and we inputting them manually into our ChatGPT chatbot, and therefore giving it commands from a predetermined guideline that we have. So that's one way of doing it, of developing a ChatGPT. Right. So you might say, I don't want these subheadings that I have. You can give it a command to say remove the numbering, right, and ensure that the literature review flows logically and synthesize, right? Synthesize further, right? And let's see what comes out. It just edits what you already have, right? You see, look at that. It edits everything that you have, right? I love the template that I've used, right? The template that I've used, it's using and bringing in words like building on, right? On this spiced car explores, right? These are the words that signify synthesizing, right? These are the words that signify synthesizing. Conversely, structured, conversely, words like this, beyond individual and individual and behavioral intervention, structure remain. Then we introduce what other scholars are saying, right? Complementing these systematic insights is a right-based perspective that emphasizes autonomy and social justice. Then we introduce another scholar. So this is a rich and synthesized literature review in relation to research question number one. Right. So for question number one, because we've used only 10 citations or 10 sources, we can only limit it to 2,000 words. Otherwise, if you have more than 20 sources that you want to use, you can input them there and actually get to 5,000 words. And so you can actually probe further and you say, this paragraph number 2 is not rich enough. Can you add more discussion and more synthesis for paragraph 2? And that can actually happen. And you can get the more information and more discussion on that paragraph, right? Any questions before we move on to a second platform, right? So we've used Google Scholar and ChatGPT to develop a research literature review for research question number one, right? Now we want to introduce what we call consensus, right? There are questions there. You can shoot, sing, please. Yes. Sing. Sing. We can't hear you. Perhaps you should type your question in the chat. Right, so there is a question here that says, do we use questions or objectives? Right, I suggest that you convert your objectives to questions. You know, if you are a researcher, your questions are similar to your objectives, right? Questions you'll be asking, you convert your objectives to questions. So the platforms work well with questions because these are interactive chatbots. So if you use objectives, they do not respond, but if you question them, they will respond to you. Right, can you share the template of the review? All right, so we'll share the template of the review, of the writing a literature review, together with the slide for the presentation, right? That will be shared with you. Can you share the template? That was Singh, right? Jason Sonda.
Thank you very much. Uh, I just want to find out, can you use the same one when you are writing your final report? You have done your final. Can you use AI in the same way of
Come again.
looking at how you are
I
using
didn't get the question.
I'm asking to find out, can I use the same uh, procedure when I'm writing my final report?
I think because of network, I'm really struggling to. Can you please type that in the chat box so that I can respond? Just type quickly. Pardon, Chikovu.
Yes, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Hello, okay. Yeah, this one is a very nice presentation. It's very insightful. So I'm going to take you a little bit back. Uh, when you were structuring this, yeah, you made a command that you attached a structure of the literature review. So what happens when you have a topic, but there's no structure? How would you develop a structure from the topic that you have?
All right. Okay, that's an interesting one. Pardon. Pardon.
Okay.
So it's very simple. Um, all right. Thank you, Sync, for muting. Right. So developing a structure for writing a literature review is a very simple exercise. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, for whatever section of your thesis or your dissertation, you can develop a structure, right? So the best way to develop the structure for your work, or let's say you want to write an introduction for your study, is to gather 10 sources, 10 articles, right? Gather 10 articles for that are related to your study, or theses, or published theses, or dissertations that relate or speak similar to your study. Then you take them to ChatGPT, then you upload them, 10 of them. Then you say, drawing on what has been done or what is in this article, generate for me an expected or acceptable structure for writing a literature review using what has been published already. You will get the most and best comprehensive structure drawing on what has been published already.
Okay, so after attaching those like previous articles or any dissertations, then I'll have to input the title of my topic.
Exactly, and the research
Okay,
questions.
and the research questions.
Right. So you
Okay.
cannot go anywhere without research questions if you are using the AI platforms, because AI platforms work with questions, right?
Okay.
They work with commands and questions. So two things, your topic and your research questions, they
Research
should
questions.
always be there. Because the moment you go outside your research questions, the platform will begin to generate for you things that are out of context. You remember in my first slide, I was talking about context. Context
Context,
is
yes.
very important. Context is very important. So the best way to maintain context when you are generating content is to have your questions guide everything that you're doing. Even if you go to generate a theoretical framework without questions, you're gonna lose focus. Without questions in your methodology, you're going to lose focus. Right.
Okay, I see.
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Jason Sonda is saying, can this way also be used in drafting a final report? Absolutely, yes. Right. So as a researcher, you need to have templates, right? That will make your life easy. Have templates for each and every section for your study, right? Have templates for writing a introduction or background of your study. Have templates for literature review. Have templates for writing a paragraph, a simple thing like a paragraph. Have a template. A paragraph has 5 aspects. You have a topic, sentence, evidence, explanation, link to the topic, all those things, so that you guide your study with your context. That's why I'm saying context is very important, and your context is guided by your research questions and the templates that you've generated for yourself. Right. Then we have born to win, right? Born to win,
Yeah,
right? What is the
yeah,
question?
born to win. Yes, born to win. I've joined from Ghana. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for the opportunity.
Yes.
Please, I want to know if the subscribed chat GPT is the only one that you can use, or the free one too can help you do this.
Right. So the free one can use, but now remember, when you are doing a PhD, I refer to a PhD as commercial work, and it's very serious, right? So
Okay.
if you are writing your master's or PhD, and if you are using a free chat GPT, you have limitations, right? You have
Okay.
limitations.
Okay.
You can upload your first
Mm,
10 articles. When you want to upload the second 10 articles, it would tell you that you have, this chat is too long. It will tell you that you've exploited your number of words. It will give you all sort of excuses.
okay.
But if you're on an unlimited,
Limit.
you
Mm,
you can write your literature review unlimited number of words. You can have 5,000 of them,
okay.
5,000 words, the whole literature review generated on one go. That's why this presentation or this workshop is say 10 minutes,
Mm,
right? Everything that I've
mm,
done, you can generate your literature review for your thesis in just 10 minutes
mm,
if you have mastered
okay.
the commands and if you have guidelines and the templates for that purpose. All
Mm,
right, do.
all right. Thank you so much.
Great.
Um,
This is exceptionally good, and you guys are doing it free. So I can imagine when I ask for a quote, I'll get more, like your paid chatbot tools. How do we ask for a quote? Number one, that's my first.
How do you quote?
No, quotes for you to take us on a deeper presentation that you're doing today for literature review. How do we ask for a quote from your
All
company?
all right. So
For
there's
yeah, for
right.
an
So
individual.
yes, for quoting purposes, for quotations and stuff like that, we'll provide you with the relevant information where you can send an email, very responsive. Within the next 15-20 minutes, you would have responded, got your response and a quotation for whatever that you require. Right. So for the purpose of time, Angiti, at the end of the presentation, let's talk about the administrative stuff. Right. Let's focus on what.
Okay, please don't answer my question. Let me just pose it here so that when you present, you think about it.
All
One,
right.
it's not just the prompts or the questions,
All
or how it's how you actually even paraphrase. Some of us will battle first with the language and the
yeah.
words to paraphrase and the commands. I think
Mhm.
we need to go step by step because I've been doing generative, trying to do some prompts, and when you look what they suggest, especially Perplexity or Cloud, they would generate in their own words. You would also try and generate in your own words, and then you realize that if I can have even better prompts, write a good relevant commands, I will even get a better one, even on the free version. So I strongly ask that I don't know where we will teach how to write commands because that's English to
All right.
me. From
Okay.
you answer
Okay.
it later. You answer later.
All right, great. That's amazing. That's an interesting question. So reason why I'm not struggling or why I'm not focusing on with commands in this particular presentation is because of one thing, right? So before we move on to the next platform that we're going to introduce, right? I'm going to share with you how I've circumvented the issue of commands. And it's very interesting because I'm not going to need to have some kind of commands because I have a template that guides what needs to be done. So I'll share with you, right? Let me share the screen first before we move on to the next step, right? I will show you and we'll share with you the template that we have, right? So this template here that I'm going to show with you, it's it captures it captures everything that we need to do, and it captures the commands as well. So I don't need to struggle with the platforms to generate commands for me, right? So if you can see this page I'm showing now, it's a page full of commands, right? It's only commands in that page, right? It is, I've managed to develop commands for myself. I'm not sure if you can see. Ngidi, can you follow? Can you confirm if you can see what I'm showing, the page document, the Word document I'm showing on the screen? Right, so what I have here is the topic sentence of how to study each and every paragraph. Extensive research has shown that studies of X has shown the importance of, it has previously been observed that previous research has established that. So these are my commands, right? And after that, this is a command. After that, you provide the evidence to support your topic sentence, right? This is a command again, right? That I've developed for myself. So this is the formula for writing a literature review here, right? The existing board of research. Now I'm telling ChatGPT, you are introducing your argument. Sure, then you are showing the evidence and demonstrating links between. Tell you are analyzing your evidence and concluding with the clincher. You are also demonstrating the link between the problem statement, right? Right, so this is just the template that I have, and this is the template that I use to generate. Then here on the template I have the example of how I want each and every paragraph in my literature review look like. Right, so this is the template I uploaded on ChatGPT. That's the template I uploaded on ChatGPT, and this template here is the one that is giving commands to ChatGPT. Right, so we'll share this template with you. It's not a train smash. We'll share the template with you. Let's go back to our second presentation, our second platform for the day, right? So that we do not waste time. So we have first paragraph, we have our first literature review. So our next literature, our next section, our next platform here focuses on research number 2, research question number 2. So we have done literature for question number 2, and we have used the combination of Google Scholar and ChatGPT. Now we want to introduce a platform called Consensus. I'm not sure if we have an experience of Consensus right before. So Consensus prides itself in being the find the best science and faster. Very fast, produce results that are credible, sources that are credible. It doesn't give you problems. So Consensus here. All right, can you please mute? Right, so Consensus, like Google Scholar, it also has, if I click here on filters, right, remember literature should be relevant, and relevance begin with the year with which that was published. So we want to limit our literature here to 2020, from 2020 to 2025, right? That's the first button we click, right? Then we want to only show peer-reviewed reports. So we only want to review literature that has been peer-reviewed and published, right? Then we click on here, open access, right? We also need open access literature. Ask paper available? No, we don't need that. Citations, right? We want literature that is highly cited, right? So we can say only literature that is more than 100 citations, right? We can choose, we want literature that is meta-analysis, systematic review, observation studies. So we want all this kind of literature review, case report, right? We don't want animal studies. You choose what kind of literature you need, right? Human studies, sample, 100, whatever, right? You choose yourself. We need journals, Q1, we need Q1 journals, we need Q2 journals, and Q3. We don't need Q4 journals, right? Now you can choose also the country from which your literature is coming from. We don't care about where the literature is coming from, but if you want only South African studies, you can come here and choose and say, I want only literature that is coming from South Africa, right? But that's not the question of the day. Then we apply our filters here, right? So we've applied our filters. We have 14 filters that we have on our study, right? So remember, I said AI platforms work with questions. You can't go anywhere with questions. It says here on my on my Consensus, ask the research. Right, so we want to generate literature review for research question number 2. We go back and copy and paste our question number 2, right? And we come back to it, to Consensus, and we copy it and paste it, and we say, how do educational environments and academic pressures affect the mental health well-being of young people, right? Then we say, ask the question. Right, let's see, let's give it some time and see what the results and what results are going to come out. Right, so this is what we have. We have, it tells you, right? So now here we have, it gives you the structure of your literature review. This is how your literature review is supposed to be to be structured, right? Similar to what ChatGPT did for us in the first instance. Here it says, educational environments and academic pressures have a significant impact on the mental health being of young people, right? And so our subheading is academic stress. Then 1, 3, and 6, these are citations, right? These are the sources that are cited, and it gives you a conclusion, right? So I want to bring it to you that consensus doesn't write like ChatGPT. It doesn't write, right? So there's another stage that we need to do. We have the structure for our literature review and how it's supposed to look like, right? So we need to copy and paste this structure, right? Let's copy and paste our structure and take it to ChatGPT and command ChatGPT and say, write a literature review for research question number 2. Question number 2, using the guidelines below. Using the guidelines below, right? We don't have much commands because already our ChatGPT, our consensus has already given us a structure, right? So, but there's one more thing that is left. And that one more thing that is left is that the beautiful thing about consensus is that we don't need to get citations like what we were doing with Google Scholar. All right, consensus is automated, so you have an option to copy and paste and copy this citation and go and take it to ChatGPT like this, right? You have that option, right? But that's tedious. That takes a lot of time, like here. Right, what are we going to do? We have an option to download here where it says results. We have an option to download all the citations. It's either in an Excel sheet, or if you have EndNote or Zotero or Medley. So if I click download here, it's downloading all the 10 analyzed articles, right? If you come here, so we have only 10 analyzed articles, right? But you can, if you click here, load more results, load more, it can give you 10 more. So now we have 20 citations or 20 sources, right? When we have done that, now we want to use 20 citations, all of them, 20 sources, right? In their summaries, we can still download and say download, right? So we have them downloaded, right? And they download in a question, how do educational environments and academic pressures affect the mental health thing? Then we go back to our ChatGPT, then we attach, right, from our downloads, right? Here's our downloads with 20 sources. I'll show you how the download look like, right? So this is our download. It's in Excel sheet, right? It has the title of the article, right? It has the title of the article. After the title, it has the summary of each study that responds to the research question. After the summary of this study, it has the citation, the authors. After the authors, it is the year, it is the citation, number of citations, 182. After the citation, it is the abstract, right? It actually has the abstract of the study and the type of the study and the journal from which it was taken. And if it is Q1 or Q2, and it has the link, and it has the links and everything. So this is the beautiful thing about consensus, right? It gives you ready food to be chowed, to be consumed, right? So we have it on our ChatGPT, right? We have attached it and we have generated it. So one thing that we need is to say, as we write, we say cite as you write, because we have already the citations. Cite as you write, right? Cite as you write, and provide a reference list only from the literature that are attached. The reason why for this command is so that we do not have literature that comes from nowhere and out of the blue, right? Write and expand. Remember, I said the word comprehensive is important, and solid. Right, those are very important words, right? So let's give it a try and see what comes out. If we're going to generate a good literature review for research question number 2 using consensus, right? So here the combination is consensus and ChatGPT, right? There you go. There you have it. Okay, so we need to verify every information that comes out in here. So educational environments and academic pressures have emerged as a dominant influence. There is now extensive literature indicating that rising in staff. Recent research has demonstrated. Then we have the research here, we have Babayanis, we have Koppen, and here we have Koppen again, we have Cosma, we have Deng, right? We have Wickman, we have all these. So we need to verify if this literature is indeed true literature. Then we click here. We need to go and click on the link, right? We need to click on the link and see if it takes us to exactly to this so you can choose to open it in a different page, in a different tab, right, and see if this is a credible study, right? If this is a true study, academic stress and mental well-being in college students. So this is a credible study. You can actually download the article here, right? Frontiers in Psychology, published in 2022. So we've seen that indeed we are working with credible literature and sources, right? So this is the combination between AI, between your consensus and your ChatGPT, right? So you are actually generating a true literature review that you are using. So by the end of the day, you should have, if you follow these steps, you should have a draft of your literature review for your master's, for your honors, or for your PhD. You should have the full draft by the end of the day with all your citations. Now, the second question, this literature here, right, there are various platforms that you can use to check for your AI detection, that you can use to check for your plagiarism, right? That we can use. One example is Humanizer AI, right? So this will be the last step. You just need to verify if your work is whether it is AI or not, it is AI detected or not. You copy it and paste it here, and you can just click here, humanize, right? Right. When you humanize it like this, when it comes out like this, it shows you that this is what we have changed. And if you put it on 1018, this will detect on 0% 1018. Right, we're not going to put it on 1018 because this is another process altogether, and we'll do a different presentation for the purposes of that presentation. Right, so that is it for us today. We've done ChatGPT and consensus, and we've done ChatGPT and your Google Scholar, automated and manual presentation of the two platforms, right? So, can you please mute your mic? Right, so this is it for our presentation today. Right, so here on the screen, these are various steps that you can do. You know, you can use summaries, but this is a long process, right? This is how your work, the summaries are gonna look like, right? Very long process, right? After you've done everything that you've done, read all paragraphs and summarize, right? Find similarities and differences. reorder the paragraphs based on the logical connection that you find. The best way is to reorder them according to themes, right? So reason for fasting, so these are reordered examples of reordered paragraphs. Now we have reordered paragraphs. Then combine the summaries. How close are the summaries? So if you look at each and every paragraph, you need to look at which other paragraph is it related to, right? You can group your literature based on various factors. Add topic sentences and transition. Make sure that you have topic sentences and transition in your each and every paragraph leads to the other, right? Then lastly, add introduction and conclusion. Make sure you have a solid introduction and conclusion for your literature review, right? Thank you so much for taking time to engage with us and listening to us. We will have more of this each and every fortnight. So a week after next week, we have another presentation of enhancing writing your literature review using AI tools. Right. So this is again Dr. Moringa, Research Director from MNG Research. We are opening up for the last round of questions before we close. Thank you so much again for